I've watched too, as I've gone around the world, I've met very, very many people in many, many social occasions. And because I don't drink anything at all now, if I go out and watch people drinking, it makes everybody stupid and fuzzy-minded. And, the problem is when you're drinking, you think you're cool, but alcohol is an extraordinarily pernicious drug. And if you're inclined towards it, you can be inclined towards it because you're sensitive to its anxiety-reducing properties, or you can be sensitive to it because it enhances social communication, or because it produces a psychomotor high like cocaine, or all of those at once. And if you're particularly predisposed to alcoholism, you can experience all three at once. Alcohol is a really bad drug. 50% of murders take place in an alcohol-fueled environment. Either the victim or the perpetrator or both is drunk. It's almost the sole cause of domestic abuse. It's almost the sole cause of so-called date rape. If you dig into criminal behavior deeply enough, well, hell, you don't have to dig much at all before you find alcohol. It's also the only drug we know that actually makes people more aggressive. And not merely because they don't know what they're doing. We did experiments at McGill showing that if you took drunk people and put them in a competitive environment where they could be aggressive and had them keep track of their aggression so they were actually conscious of it, they became more aggressive even rather than less. So alcohol's bad news, and it can turn perfectly good people into quite the impulsive and dim-witted monsters. Yeah, and the funny thing is, if you're trying to stop drinking, you need something better than alcohol. You want to figure out something that you're doing with your life that's worth not getting drunk and screwing up.
Yeah.
Right. Because that's fun. You might say, well, why do people drink too much? It's like, if you like alcohol, that's a stupid question.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, why do people drink too much? Well, because it's great.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, so why stop? Well, you do stupid things when you're drunk. You hurt yourself. You compromise your health. It's really hard on the people around you. You tend to turn into a liar, and it screws up your life.
Yeah.
It's like, but it's pretty fun. Yeah, well, it is. But you need something better than that. And what's better isn't being straight and not making mistakes. It's like, that's all prohibition in some sense. What's better is, no, you need an adventure, man. You need to get out there and have something to do and something worth waking up for. And that's the substitute for the addiction. Actually, the addiction is the substitute for that, if truth be known. Maybe you need to, take an adventurous trip now and then. You got to have something there that's edgy to replace that. So why quit drinking? So I don't end up in hell. Hey, there's a reason to stop. And then if you make that hell real, it's like, here's all the details of my personal hell. Yes, let's avoid that.
Right.
So then you have something to run the hell away from.
Why is it hard for people to let go of what's so familiar to them, even if it's bad?
Well, because it's complicated, and the thing, that's a really good question. You discount the risk of familiarity that you're familiar with. So like, let's say I have a job I hate. It's like, well, yeah, but I'm not dying from it. It's like not as bad as it can be. So you factored in the risks already. They get invisible. You think, well, I can't jump out of this job because what about all the risk? It's like, yeah, no kidding. You got to get your resume in order. You got to send it out. You got to send 50 of the damn things out before anybody will call you back. Then you have to go get interviewed, and maybe you're not any good at that. You have to come up with a story while you're a good employee, and maybe you're not yet, so you have to figure out how to do that. It's like, what about all these risks if I go look for a new job? It's like, yeah, absolutely, man. Those are risks, and they're harsh, and no wonder you're avoiding them. What about the risks for you to stay with this job you absolutely hate? Well, let's think that through. Okay, so I have this dead-end job. I hate it. I'm getting bitter. Where am I going to be in 5 years? I know where, because I've watched this with people. You're going to be just like you are now, except a lot more of what's good about you is going to be gone, and a lot more of what's terrible is going to be amplified. And you're going to be like, in 5 years, you're going to be 10 years older instead of 3 years older. So it's like, you think, oh my God, there's a terrible risk in pursuing this new job. It's like, yeah, there is a terrible risk. There's a terrible risk in you staying with your job right now. And so one of the things that's really, really freeing to understand is that you're screwed no matter what you do. There's no secure path forward. Give it up. It's risk everywhere. You think, oh my God, that's terrible. It's like, yes, except for two things. You can pick your risk. That's the first thing. So you get to pick your poison. That's something. And second, you're a lot tougher than you think. So even though there's risk everywhere, if you confront it forthrightly, what you'll find is that you can actually handle the risk. And that's the security. Alcohol is an interesting drug because it it actually doesn't make people stupid. This has been tested. Like people who are drunk will take far more risk. And you might say, well, that's because they're too stupid to understand the risk. It's like, no, they're not. If you ask them about the risk when they're drunk, they can outline it perfectly. What it stops them from doing is caring about the risk. It's actually, and that's part of the anti-anxiety component. It's like, yeah, the risk is, that's why you can drive around drunk at high speed in a car, which is a really stupid thing to do.
Yeah.
We used to do that in the back roads of northern Alberta. It's fun.
Yeah.
You know, but people died all the time doing it, especially in the winter. It's like, wow, this is great. It's great until your head's gone through the windshield. You know, like so many things.
Yeah.
You know, it's like jumping off a cliff. I'm flying, which is true until the last 1/10 of a second. It's like, then you're not flying, man. It's like, yeah. So alcohol has exactly that effect. It is a great anti-anxiety drug, but it does stop you, and you said it stopped you from learning the skills that you need in a social circumstance to be able to cope with that. So then it actually stops you from dealing with the anxiety. You don't have to learn how to overcome it. You're also going to find out who your friends are.
Yeah.
Because if you're starting to put your life together and you have friends that object, those are not friends. Those are just people you know. They're not friends, because a friend is someone, this is one of the hallmarks of a friend. Here's 2 hallmarks. A friend is someone you can tell bad news to. And they won't tell you why you're an idiot, and they won't interfere with your suffering. They'll just listen, and maybe they'll suffer along with you. Okay, so you can tell bad news to them, and they won't tell you some worse thing that happened to them. They'll listen, and they'll suffer along with you. But a friend is also someone you can tell good news to. And the friend will say, wow, in this vale of tears, something good happened to you. Great, man.
Congrats.
I'm wonderful. It's rare. It's unlikely. Good for you. I hope 10 more things like that happen. And they're not envious, and they're not jealous, and they're not one-upping you. And if you're trying to get your life together, it's actually, if you're trying to get your life together and your friends get in the way, that's actually real useful for you, because you've now identified who your friends aren't. And you might think, well, I can't give them up. It's like, oh, yes, you can. And not only can you should, and it would be better for them. Because if they're aiming down and they want you going down with them, there's nothing good about what's happening to them, and there's certainly nothing good about that for you. Alcohol also makes people aggressive. It's the only drug we know that actually makes people aggressive. So you see a massive effect on crime rates, because half the people who murder someone are drunk.
Oh, yeah.
And half the people who are murdered are drunk. And you're most likely to be murdered by a family member.
Yeah.
So I've been joking with my audiences, is like, well, if you really want to get killed, the best thing to do is go drink with a family member. So, which is actually statistically true, which is terribly comical.
Crazy.
It's like, yeah, go get drunk with your family if you want to die. If you want the dog to continue coming, hit it hard. Why can't sex just be casual and fun? It's better if the punishment is harsh. You're useless.
Sure, motivating.
Whack! You're useless. Lay on the couch for 10 years.
Mostly people don't like having their children eaten by tigers.